The studio lights of today with Jenna and Friends glittered across the polished floor as Carrie Underwood took her seat, offering the audience her signature warm smile, one that barely concealed the flicker of hesitation she'd felt since stepping onto the set, a subtle intuition warning her that today's interview wouldn't unfold as smoothly as usual. Jenna greeted her enthusiastically, but almost immediately, the tone shifted as one of the co-hosts leaned forward with a pointed question about a recent controversy surrounding Carrie's tour decisions. A question framed not with curiosity, but with a sharpness that made the audience murmur and caused Carrie's smile to tighten at the edges. She answered calmly, her voice steady and gracious as always, yet before she could finish, the co-host interjected with a follow-up that twisted her words, pushing the conversation into territory that felt more like interrogation than interview, and the tension that settled over the studio made it clear, even in the first minutes, that this was not going to be a typical morning show segment filled with laughter and light-hearted anecdotes, but a collision between restraint and provocation that could only escalate from here. Jenna attempted to redirect the conversation with a softer question about Carrie's new album, but the same co-host interrupted again, pressing Carrie on topics she had never agreed to discuss: personal matters, online rumors, and disputes blown out of proportion by tabloids. And Carrie's expression shifted, the warmth slipping into a tight, controlled calm that seasoned viewers of her interviews would instantly recognize as her hold-your-ground mode. The audience sensed the shift, leaning forward in their seats as if bracing for the next verbal blow, and the tension rippled through the room like static electricity as the co-host's tone hardened further, accusing Carrie of dodging accountability for things she had no involvement in to begin with. Carrie inhaled slowly, her posture straightening as she warned, politely but unmistakably, that she wasn't there to be mischaracterized or ambushed, and the hint of steel beneath her voice caused a hush to fall over the set, signaling the exact moment the interview transformed from uncomfortable to volatile. Undeterred, the co-host pushed even harder, raising her voice just slightly, enough to make the moment feel combative rather than conversational, and she referenced a series of online posts completely out of context, framing them as if Carrie had played a direct role in stirring controversy. Carrie's eyes widened in disbelief before narrowing with a composed, icy calm that only intensified the tension, and she leaned forward, her tone measured but unmistakably firm as she said that she refused to let false narratives dictate her truth, a statement that drew spontaneous applause from the audience. Jenna shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing that the interview had crossed a line, and she attempted once more to steer the conversation back to safer ground, but the co-host seemed determined to push Carrie into reacting emotionally, tossing yet another loaded question into the air like a grenade. The room held its breath, the intensity simmering beneath the surface like a pot about to boil over. Carrie's voice remained steady, but the edge beneath it grew sharper as she explained that she had spent years building her career on authenticity, hard work, and respect, not on petty drama served up for ratings, and that if the show had invited her on simply to provoke her, then they should have been honest about their intentions from the start. Her words buzzed through the studio like electricity, and Jenna glanced nervously at the cameras, aware that the moment had already spiraled beyond anyone's control. The co-host, instead of backing down, smirked dismissively, insisting she was just asking questions. But the tone made it clear she was doing far more than that. She was provoking deliberately, pushing buttons with the precision of someone chasing headlines. Carrie exhaled slowly, her patience fraying at the edges as she warned that respect was a two-way street, and the live audience sat frozen, feeling the atmosphere thicken into something heavy and combustible. Sensing the tension reaching a breaking point, the producers frantically gestured for Jenna to cut to commercial. But before she could speak, the co-host once again fired off a pointed accusation, this time questioning Carrie's integrity directly. And that was the moment everything snapped. The audience gasped aloud, Jenna's face paled, and Carrie's expression hardened with a calm finality, the kind that signaled she had reached the absolute limits of what she was willing to tolerate in a professional setting. She told the co-host, in a voice so steady it was almost chilling, that twisting someone's intentions for the sake of momentary drama wasn't journalism, it wasn't conversation, and it definitely wasn't respectful. And if the show wanted to continue down that road, they could do so without her presence. The silence that followed felt enormous, the type that swallows sound and leaves only the raw pulse of rising conflict behind. Carrie pushed her chair back slightly, the scrape of the legs against the glossy studio floor cutting through the quiet like a blade, and she said that no guest, no matter how famous, how experienced, or how gracious, deserved to be blindsided with accusations disguised as questions. The co-host attempted to defend herself, but Carrie raised a hand, politely, firmly, silencing her with a gesture that carried more power than a shout ever could. She explained that she had shown up prepared for a meaningful conversation about her music, her projects, and her journey, not to be cornered in a spectacle masquerading as journalism, and the audience murmured in sympathy, clearly siding with her as the co-host shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. Jenna pleaded quietly for calm, her voice barely audible over the tension, but Carrie had already made up her mind, her composure solidifying into something resolute. Carrie stood slowly, smoothing the front of her outfit with a grace that contrasted starkly with the emotional intensity crackling through the studio, and as she rose, the audience responded with a mixture of shock and admiration, gasps, murmurs, even scattered applause that grew louder as they realized what she was doing. She thanked the respectful members of the panel, nodding toward Jenna with genuine warmth, but her eyes hardened when they returned to the co-host who had provoked her, and she said, without raising her voice, without a hint of theatrics, that she refused to stay anywhere she wasn't treated with basic human decency. The words hung in the air like a verdict, and the co-host opened her mouth to respond, but Carrie was already stepping away from the table. Her departure sending a visible wave of panic through the production crew, as camera operators scrambled to keep up with the unfolding chaos. As Carrie moved toward the edge of the stage, the producers scrambled, some shouting into headsets, others rushing forward with desperate expressions, trying to coax her into staying until the next break, insisting that they could smooth everything over, fix the tone, repair the moment. But Carrie merely shook her head, saying she wouldn't sit there pretending everything was fine when the show had crossed a line it never should have approached. Jenna stood up as well, calling after her with genuine worry, apologizing repeatedly on behalf of the show, but Carrie placed a reassuring hand on her arm, telling her softly that she understood Jenna wasn't responsible for the ambush, but that she also couldn't remain in a space where she was forced to defend herself against distortions and hostility. The co-host sat frozen at the table, visibly rattled as the audience stared, realizing she had unintentionally orchestrated the exact crisis the producers feared most. Carrie paused at the curtain leading backstage, turning back just long enough to address the audience directly, saying that she loved them, appreciated their support, and valued open conversations, even difficult ones, but only when conducted with honesty and respect, not when framed as traps designed to provoke reactions for the sake of spectacle. The audience erupted into applause, the kind that carried both support and indignation at how she had been treated, and the cameras captured every moment as Jenna lowered her head, realizing the magnitude of the fallout unfolding live before millions of viewers. Carrie gave one last nod, the type that closed a chapter with dignity rather than spite, and then she stepped behind the curtain, disappearing from the set as the remaining hosts were left staring at the empty chair she'd abandoned. An empty chair that now symbolized the show's failure to protect its guest and maintain its integrity. Back on stage, chaos swallowed the broadcast as Jenna struggled to salvage the segment, her voice trembling as she attempted to transition into the next topic. But the audience's energy had shifted beyond repair, lingering on the shockwave of Carrie's exit. The co-host responsible for the confrontation sat stiffly, her eyes unfocused as producers barked frantic instructions through her earpiece, attempting to craft a narrative that could soften the blow of what millions had just witnessed. Yet no amount of spin could erase the truth. The show had crossed a line. Carrie Underwood had walked off in front of a live audience, and the moment would be replayed, clipped, analyzed, and debated across every platform for days, if not weeks. As the credits rolled, the set felt hollow, heavy, overshadowed by the absence of the star who had walked away with her dignity intact, leaving behind a broadcast forever marked by one of the most explosive interviews in morning show history. As Carrie stepped back toward the hallway that led to the dressing rooms, the producers scrambled like someone had kicked over a box of loose wires, frantically whispering into earpieces and gesturing at crew members who suddenly looked unsure whether to follow her, stop her, or pretend none of it was happening. Meanwhile, Jenna remained frozen in her seat. Her smile collapsed into a stunned half-grimace as she tried to regain control of the room by insisting, loud enough for the still live microphones to catch, that Carrie was overreacting, a word that only made the already electric atmosphere crackle even harder. Carrie stopped mid-stride, not turning fully around but just enough to show a profile lined with disappointment rather than anger, and she told Jenna that being pushed, cornered, and misrepresented wasn't something anyone had to endure just to fill a morning entertainment slot, and that choosing to walk away wasn't overreacting. It was setting a boundary. The audience, unsure whether to gasp or applaud, remained suspended in a breathless hush as Carrie added that artists came on the show to share music, stories, and humanity, not to be ambushed for viral moments, and that respect shouldn't vanish the moment a host wanted a hotter headline. Her words echoed across the studio, flattening the remaining chatter, and as Carrie resumed walking toward the exit with steady, deliberate steps, the cameras kept rolling helplessly, capturing a moment that would soon explode online as one of the most dramatic walk-offs in the show's history.